Well, today I want to start a new series with you, Living by Faith, Then and Now. We've been talking about zero victimhood and trying to undo what the world has done by making everybody feel so gloomy and so bad and so awful about how the Bible is a beautiful thing, and the message of the gospel is a happy thing. It makes you more abundant to live Jesus' way. He said it would. And one of the things it's going to require of us is living by faith. Well, if you're going to talk about living by faith, who's better to start with than Abraham? We're going to look at living by faith then and living by faith now. We're going to try to see what they did. I'd like for us to get to know Abraham better than we ever have. I wish we could walk in his shoes. I wish we could feel some of the stresses and struggles that he had, because Abraham's not a perfect person. There are no perfect people in the Bible but Jesus. Did you know that? And the Lord, in His inspiration, tells things like it is. There was a famous lord in England a number of years ago was having his picture painted. And the artist, he had an ugly wart on his cheek. And the artist asked him, do you want me to remove the wart in your painting? He said, no, paint me as I am, warts and all. Well, Jesus sees you as you are, warts and all. I had a humbling statement I heard someone make just in the last week or two. Said, if we could see us the way God sees us, we'd be sick at our stomach. That's kind of a scary thought. But I believe the man's exactly right. Walking by faith and not by sight. It's a statement Paul makes. We read it earlier. It's in the 7th chapter, verse 7 of the 5th chapter of the book of 2 Corinthians. We walk by faith and not by sight. He's been talking about all the groans and pains and difficulties we have here, and then the looking forward to heaven where it's going to be so much better. And so here we are in the middle now, and he says we walk by faith and not by sight. And that gave me the idea for this series. So we're going to go back in the Bible. He also says in Romans chapter 12 and verse 4, the things written before time are written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. I need to learn what's been written before time. God didn't give it to you to just carry it around and sit on your coffee table. He meant you to study to show yourself approved unto God, like Paul told Timothy to do as a young minister. You study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that doesn't need to be ashamed of your work. And he uses the idea there of like working in bricklaying or something like that. You want to be proud of what you do. I want to be proud of the lesson I preached today. And I worked hard on it. And I prayed hard about it. And I hope that you feel that need to be proud of the life you live. And making contact with people, Lynn, like you're doing, Tom, like you're doing, and like a lot of you are doing. That's something you can be grateful for. And one of the things that Jesus can say, well done, about good and faithful servant. Our lesson text is how Abraham stepped out on faith. He couldn't see it, but he trusted God. Do you trust God? We sing the song, Trust and Obey. There's no other way to be happy in Jesus but trust and obey. And so this time we heard it say about Abraham, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. You know where you're going? Do you know what tomorrow holds for you? Lynn, who will you see tomorrow? You're in a place where you see people constantly. Who will you see tomorrow? You go in the doctor's office, you're going to see some folks. Are you going to go there and represent Jesus, or what are you going to do? You're going to hide your light? You're going to let it shine. What are you going to do? But he went out anyway because he trusted God. In the book of Hebrews, we've talked to this in the Bible class. I'm not sure we did in the morning worship. And I'd like to catch some of you all up with some of this. In chapter 11, the very first verse, the writer begins explaining what faith is. And I told the Bible class group, at least, the book of Hebrews is written to some Hebrew Christians who are getting discouraged. Persecution is starting. It's not popular to be a Christian. And they're kind of ducking their head. They're kind of hiding. They're kind of falling away. And so he wants to remind them why we need to stand firm for Jesus. Why we need to go on for Him. He says, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. In other words, you can't see it, but you can see some evidence. Now, Some of the later versions will say faith is the assurance of things hoped for. Paul over in Romans chapter 1 talks about that anybody can look out at the creation and see it had to have a creation. These folks who say it was all an accident and just happened by an explosion, I've seen what explosions do. It doesn't turn into a beautiful world like this. It does the very opposite. You ever notice that? There had to be a guidance behind the power that brought all this into being. And anybody who says there isn't, they're just not facing the facts. Paul says they're being stupid, foolish, intentionally. They don't want to admit there's a God because then they've got to mind rules. And they don't want rules. They want to do whatever they want to do. They want to be their own God. And so they have to have a whole lot of faith to say, nobody did this. Nobody caused that beautiful sunrise. No one caused that no one caused those beautiful flowers to grow. How can it be that done? Anyway, it is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. You've got evidence. People investigate murders. They didn't see the murder, but they gather the evidence. And they say, was there a murder here? And people's life can hang in the balance of whether or not the evidence demonstrates. And you can look at the evidence. God's real. God's here. God's keeping all this stuff on track. Nothing's flying off the side. God's real. Another verse I want you to look at with me, please, very quickly, is the 6th verse of the 11th chapter. But without faith it is impossible to please Him, for he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is the rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. He's got to believe that. He's got to understand that. And that's what Abraham is doing. If we want to study Abraham, we need to turn back to the book of Genesis. And you can go on back there with me, if you would please. I'd like to get to know Abraham. And I'd like to get to know the challenges he faced. You face challenges right now. You may not want to admit it, but I think if you think about it a little bit, you do. You've got things you worry about, things you dream about, things that concern you. To start to meet that man, Abraham, you've got to go to the 11th chapter of the book of Genesis. In the 11th chapter, it begins talking about the Tower of Babel. There was a time when man decided, we're going to be our own God, we're going to build our own tower to heaven, and it's going to be wonderful. Man already trying to be God. So God confused their languages, and that's why it's called the Tower of Babel. And it picks up from that point and begins talking about the genealogy from Seth, the son of Adam. And he replaced Abel. He was the third child. And Seth is the first one, it says in the Bible, called upon the name of the Lord. Seth worshiped God. That's what that phrase means. When you come across that with Abraham quite a bit. Wherever he goes, he's going to be building an altar and he'll be calling on the name of the Lord. He was a worshiper. Just as we come today and worship God, these people understood. You're going to have to. God is real and we need to worship Him. He is so powerful and He's so great, we need to worship Him. Anyway, as you run down the genealogy through from the 8th verse on down there in the 11th chapter, you will come down and you will find there's a man who has 3 sons. One of them is Abraham. Abraham's the oldest. One of the 3 sons dies early, and he has a son named Lot, and it seems like Abraham kind of adopted Lot. And God has given instructions to leave your home country, Ur of the Chaldees, and to go a place I'm going to show you. Now, it's quite a long journey that they have to make. Ur of the Chaldees is a very special place in that day. It was New York City. It was fine. And in fact, when you study archaeology, Ur of the Chaldees was far more advanced than you would have imagined. They had learned to pipe water and all that kind of thing into the city. And it was a very, very nice, plush place. Well, staying comfortable is hardly ever what Christians get to do. And staying comfortable in that day was hardly ever what God's people got to do. They had to undergo some hardship. So they're going to go out, and he's going to live in tents from now on. How do I go camp from here on out? That's good. Somebody said, I want to do that. Well, that's what God wanted him to do. And he did. He took Lot. It's kind of like he's taking him on almost like a foster child. He and Sarah and Lot, they come to the promised land. And when they do, in chapter 12, the very first verse, it says, "Now the Lord had said to Abram," notice his name is not Abraham. I'll probably slip and say that once in a while. But that is the name he'll get later on. God renames his people oftentimes. Saul becomes Paul. Simon becomes Peter. And sinners become Christians. He renames us. We become a new creature in Christ Jesus. Well, and that'll come along later. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Get out of your country, and from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you, and I will make a great nation of you. And I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing." I remember studying this phrase in Hebrew. And Hebrew doesn't have a lot of the markings that we have in our language. It doesn't even have vowels. They have to suggest what the vowels are, and people have gone along and tried to suggest which vowel goes with which. Anyway, the question was to us, is this a promise or is this a command? And you shall be a blessing. Is that a promise? Is that a command? And the answer is yes. You are to be a blessing. And you will be a blessing if you follow God. He's the only one that can direct us. "And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all families of the earth shall be blessed." How do we know how far our blessings go? How do we know how many people are helped? We don't know. But you do your part and God will do his part. Sociologists say that a person's influence lasts for 150 years. Did your mom and daddy bless you? I was talking to the class, Bible class. We went to a very important person in our lives' funeral this week. And one of the first things her son said, he was preaching the sermon that day, "My parents blessed me." And he has passed that blessing on now. He preaches to hundreds every Sunday. He passed that blessing on. The world needs blessing. Jesus came here and started listening. "Blessed are the poor." He came bringing blessings. Do you see yourself as a channel of blessing? Rick, we have a song about that. Where do you go? He's over here. We have a song about that, being a channel of blessing. Verse 4. "So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran." That's about a halfway point. They started on the journey, but his daddy had died there. And he's moving on from there now to go do what God had told him to do. And the man's already 75. We think we're done at 75, don't we? Abraham just getting started. One of the interesting people in the Bible is the man Caleb. He's 80 years old. He was one of the 12 spies that went in the first time to spy out the promised land. He and Joshua were the only ones that came out of the 12 and said, "We can well take this land." And the others said, "Oh, we're like grasshoppers. They've got forts around their cities. They're all giants, and we're just grasshoppers to them. We can't do this." Well, at 80 years old, Caleb goes back into the land with Joshua. Joshua says, "What do you do for you, Caleb?" He says, "Give me this mountain." He wanted the mountain where the giants were. Where are you? Well, this idea of retiring at 65, that is not a biblical concept. Listen, "Be thou faithful unto death." When you retire, you ought to get more active for the Lord, not less. You got more time. Often we have our own finances for that time. You can do whatever you want to do. You can lay around and mope, you can play golf all the time if you want to, or you can get busy for Jesus. So at 75 years old, here he goes. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions, and all the people that they had acquired, and off they go to Canaan. And they arrive. And the next several verses will tell you about that. It even tells you the location. You can go get your... I've got to have my Bible maps. We went to look at this. And it's just astounding how far they traveled. And they didn't have a modern car. They made it anyway. And so they come and they set up. And guess what it says as they pitch their tent? I'm in verse 8. On the west of Ai and on the east... and he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. You will find wherever, I remember Brother Baxter pointing this out in early Hebrew history at Lipscomb. He said, wherever he goes, there'll be an altar built there. God's that important to him. How important is God to you? Wherever he goes, he's going to leave his mark. He's going to be worshiping God. He's going to be calling on his name. Now, the name means something special, too, in the Hebrew people. It represents that person. The name is that person. And so, he is worshiping God. So, Abram journeyed on still further south, verse 10. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there. Now, we'll find that in the Bible other times. The way Ruth even gets in the Bible, being a Moabitess, is that Naomi and her husband had come down there because there was a bad famine in the land. They heard there was food in Moab. That's the only way to go. So, it's so bad you're going to die if you don't leave. Today we have migrations of people because of similar situations, and sometimes even war. So severe they went down to Egypt. And entering Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, "Indeed I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance." Get this. She's 10 years younger than Abram. He was 75 when they left. She was 65. It's been another little, I don't know, she's maybe 67 now. And she's drop dead gorgeous. Now, I know the sun rays, they tell us, maybe are more severe on us than they were back then. And these people will live a bit longer. But I want you to know, this is a woman to kill for. Therefore, it will happen verse 12, when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Therefore, please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and I may live because of you. We said it's going to be with horns and all, with warts and all. Abraham has trouble with the truth. How do you do it? The truth. James said if anybody doesn't offend in tongue, he's a perfect person. Well, you're going to find that this guy's not perfect. Now, he loves God. He serves God. He calls upon God. He trusts God. But he doesn't trust him enough right here, does he? You're going to find when you go to really study the people in the Bible, just like you have struggles and you have problems with your faith and you have trouble trusting Him and doing what's right, and you'll have personality weaknesses. Satan will come back and use that on you time and time again. Now, it's a half-truth. Later, he'll not do this once. He'll do this twice. He'll do this later with Abimelech and do the same thing. And Abimelech, another king, will nail him down on this. Why did you lie to me about your wife? He said, well, she's my half-sister. We have the same father, but I'm by another wife. So anyway, it's a half-truth. But it is intended to deceive. You know, you've got to be careful what you say and how you say it. Jesus talks about this, let your yes be yes and your no, no. By your words, you will be justified. By your words, God's not going to whitewash this kind of stuff. But it's interesting how God is with this man even when he's sinning. And you know what? It may be Abraham was right. I don't know. A power. He's facing Pharaoh. That's who he's worried about, is Pharaoh. And you know enough about Egypt, about pharaohs and all that kind of stuff, and they pretty well do what they want to do. But the way it went, the princes of Egypt pointed this woman out to Pharaoh, and sure enough, he gets her. And Abraham gets treated really, 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 really good because of Sarah. Now, he'll come away from here a rich man. But, let's start in verse 16. He treated Abram, speaking of Pharaoh, well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen and male donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels and but then verse 17. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. God steps in. Remember, he had told him, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to curse those who curse you. Remember he said all that? The Lord, before he left this earth, said, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved, and he who does not believe shall be condemned. As Matthew's recorded, he also goes, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. The Lord's still with him. Just like Paul, when he was at his first defense against Caesar, he said, no man stood with me, but the Lord was with me. Just like Joseph, when he was lied about by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison, it says, but the Lord was with him. When he got sold into slavery by his own brothers, it says, but the Lord was with him. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace because they will not bow down to the king, they peer into the fire, and it was so strong it killed the soldiers that threw them in there. But there's people walking around in the fire unshackled, and there's 4 of them. And as the old king looks at him and said, the last one looks like the Son of God. I don't know how you didn't recognize him. The Lord was there too. Whatever fire you're in, whatever you're in, God's there too. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Now, Pharaoh gets to play the hurt one, the victim. I'm not sure if he'd have known the truth originally, that he wouldn't have done what Abraham said. I'm not sure about that. Why did you say she is my sister? That I might have taken her for my wife. Now therefore, here is your wife, take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent them away with his wife and all that he had. And Abraham went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. Abram was very rich, and in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south so far as Bethel. Now you've heard of that town, that city before lots of times, and set his tent up there. And once again, he's going to be between Bethel and Ai. Verse 4. So in the place of the altar where he had made there first, and Abram called on the name of the Lord. Sometimes do you kind of come to worship after maybe kind of rugged week? Maybe you, like Abram, has realized you've slipped and sinned and failed, even shamed yourself. Isn't it good? We have a loving God who still loves us. And he can go back and he can worship God once again. Jesus' death on the cross made this possible. The poem you read, Lynn, a little bit ago, made that point so good at the end. When you get the cash register, the bill is paid. What do we do? Well, if I've never been baptized into Christ, I need to do that. I need to put on Christ. I need to be having Him living in my life and helping me. If I've sinned and fallen short and brought disgrace on the church, I need to repent and ask for forgiveness. We have an invitation song today. Are you living by faith? Do you really trust God? Really? We're going to have to, folks. We're going to have to. If you're not there, if you need to be there, why don't you come as together we stand?